Yes, hello from the Steel City. I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. My name is Leah Prime, and this is the Invisible Night School. For those of you just joining us, the Invisible Night School is a small consortium of lay researchers and scholars pursuing the study and exploration of ufology, high strangeness, and the phenomenon. INS is not a monolith. We represent varied ideas, backgrounds, disciplines, and experiences and seek to engage in good faith dialogue with other curious minds. Today we've got a special show lined up at a special time, obviously, broadcasting at 3 p.m. Eastern. We're joined by Marco Visconti, whose book, The Aleister Crowley Manual, Thelemic Magic for Modern Times, was just released. Marco's work presents a no-nonsense practical guide to working the magic of Aleister Crowley. He's taught hundreds of students to navigate and explore the transmutive powers in the Western esoteric tradition, and I'm super, super excited to welcome him to the show. Hey,
Hello,
Marco.
nice to meet you. Hi, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. I'm delighted. This conversation has been a long time coming, and I'm really excited to have you join myself. And also, of course, let me get Campbell on the stream too. Heaven forbid I forget him.
Hi, Campbell. Nice to meet you.
Hello.
Virtually.
Yes, and part of the reason I'm so excited to speak with you, one, I've been following your work for a while, really appreciate what you're doing, both with your teaching and with the book that you're putting out, and also very aligned, I would say, kind of politically in the sense of understanding and exploring some of the political incursions in fringe subjects. We certainly see this in the UFO space. And I'm also excited to talk to you because here at INS, we're always interested in, I would say, more thoughtful conversations about high strangeness or liminal spaces. And I've just been so impressed with the conversations I've heard you be part of, the different podcasts and shows that you've done. So super, super excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yes. Also, I see I'm getting questions from Nick. It's not a water closet. No, I'm actually sitting in a hotel in Pittsburgh. I'm stranded because of weather. And so I'm in a conversion of an old YMCA that was turned into a very bougie Wes Anderson-esque boutique hotel.
Yeah, I mean, I did wonder, what is that actually?
It's an ironing board. It's an ironing board and I guess something to hang clothes on. I don't know. I don't own anything that needs ironing, so this is a foreign universe to me.
Well, you did say it was bougie.
It is bougie. Yeah, it's very bougie.
There in your towns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Marco, would you be able to familiarize me and the audience with sort of just a brief synopsis of your most recent book?
Of course. Well, let's see where to start. First of all, I have the book here, so if anybody wants to see what it looks like, it's red. There's big letters, and there's a strange character on the front, right? This strange, like, goat, angel, woman kind of thing, which is called Baphomet. And I will tell you the secret, like, that was not my choice of the color, but, this is my first book, right? And when you go with a publisher, you just have to go with the flow and go with what the PR team says to be, the marketing team says to it's gonna look better. To be fair, it looks better in the sense that I was on in a bookshop the other day here in London, and it really pops out, right? So, okay, that makes sense. What is this book? If you ever try to make sense of magic, with the K, so something that's not stage magic, so it's not illusion, so it's not like a trick, but something that supposedly should be like a series of techniques that get you to elevate your spiritual self to higher levels, okay? And also maybe a series of techniques that can get you what you want, okay? If you ever try to read a book like that, you usually end up on a spectrum. On one side, you get very dense, very complicated, from time to time, books loaded with academic terms. And if you're a newbie, you're completely like lost, right? Crowley himself was on that, on the side of the spectrum. He is magnum opus, which is Liber ABA, Magic in Theory and Practice, which I quote in this book quite a lot. in the introduction, he really says, like, I'm writing this book for everyone, for the pugilist, for the housewife, for the banker, and then next chapter, if you don't have enough like background, you're lost. Now, on the other side of that spectrum, you find something that simplifies the matter way too much. I'm not a fan of what's called today like manifestation or new thought, something like that. But all these strands of emergence, new religions, or emergent new religions, or new age spirituality, kind of come from magic, right? But they kind of simplify the thing too much. So in many ways, I try to write a book that struck a chord in the middle, right? A perfect balance there, where if you never read about magic, if you never practice magic, you don't know what magic is, I think you can read this book, and by the end of it, which it's a fast read, it's only 156 pages, it's not too dense at all. It's written in very, very simple English. English is not my mother tongue. Yes, it's obvious from the way I speak, right? But I think, but by the end of it, you'll be able to have a good idea of what you need to do in order to get some results from this magic. So first of all, you will know what magic can really do for you, which is can be seen into can be divided into approaches. What I call low magic or sorcery, which is I don't know. I want a better job. What should I do to make sure that the universe conspires with me so that I can get the better job I want? And on the other side of the spectrum, what I call high magic or theurgy, how a series of practices that will change you quite dramatically, in fact, in order for you to become the better version of yourself, at least in this incarnation, right? If you believe in incarnation, you don't have to believe in reincarnation as well. And of course, all of this is tinted by my thelemic philosophy. Thelema is a Greek word that means will. And of course, it's also the word that was used by Aleister Crowley to define his magical and magical philosophy. You can call it a religion as well. It's not really a religion, but it can be a religion if you want. Let's call it magical philosophy, right? And so, Thelema does color the Western esoteric tradition, and so the magical practices, with some specific practices and some specific outlooks. And all of that is in the book. It's not written for other magicians. This is something that, I said it before, and I'm gonna say it again. This book is written for you, Campbell. Like somebody who's never done magic, maybe you don't know anything. I hope that people like you might be curious and will try it out, right? I will also understand the criticism that's already been moved in my direction. Well, from other magicians, from other Thelemites, say, well, it is too simple. That's fine. It's not written for you, right? It is meant to be an introduction for everybody. Exactly like Crowley wanted his Liber ABA, Magic in Theory and Practice, to be for everybody, for the housewife, for the banker, for the pugilist, etc., etc. Yeah, that's it, pretty much. That is, just a general idea. I hope that answered the question.
Beautiful. Yes. And I want to zoom out even a little further. Because like I said to you in Twitter DM, like I run kind of a show for smart people into UFOs. So it's not we have a lot more critical thought here, but this is decidedly not an occultist or esoteric show. So I would love to hear a description of what magic entails in this context for listeners and viewers that may be unfamiliar with this term, and what practice may entail.
Of course. So first of all, when I speak of magic, I use a specific term. It's magic with decay, which it's not just like an old spelling, a old English spelling of magic. It is really a very specific blend of Western tradition and Eastern traditions, such as meditation, yoga, to a certain degree at a more advanced level, which I only briefly touch on the book, Tantra. And this is a specific blend that Crowley kind of trademarked, right? And the true aim of these practices is, first of all, to enable the neophyte, the person that tries this practice out, to discover their true will. Now, true will or pure will is another important, I would say, cardinal point that you find in the magical and religious philosophy of dilemma and in the book. And that's what I mentioned before, right? Trying something that will enable each one of us to live out the best version of ourselves. There's also a more, I would say, a more, how do you call it? Maybe a spiritual version of it, spiritual understanding of it. And that's it, that, true will really, it's something that enables you to establish a direct line with the Godhead. And by that, I mean, the universal arche of creation, what started creation. The idea really is that each one of us has one direct line with it. And oftentimes the direct line is hidden, and most of the time it stays hidden our entire lifetimes, right? For those of us who are religious, maybe religion can bring us closer to those moments of realization where you feel there's something else that calls to you. Or if you're a skeptic and you are an atheist, maybe you've felt that from time to time through art. Okay, whenever you are in, I don't know, I'm a musician, right? I'm a guitar player. I think I see another guitar player. When you play the perfect solo, I know if you're on stage. I mean, I've been a professional musician before, moving on to do other things. One thing that's literally one memory that's imprinted in my mind, in 2007, I played the Coachella Festival in front of 60,000 people, and it was like something
so cool.
I will never forget that. That was something that reminded me, when I was playing those songs. It wasn't my band. I was playing keyboards for this much bigger band called VMV Nation, and I grew up listening to them.
I love VMV Nation, so this is killing me. This is so cool. Yeah.
And like we got to play one of my favorite songs at Coachella in 2007. Like, that was a moment that I felt something that I felt at the same time when I'm into deep magical practices. So in many ways, this is what magic should do. Should allow for each one of us to establish this connection. Now, what I think it's important to say, since the crowd here is pretty much on the UFO UAP side, right? I'm gonna go on a wild tangent here, but whatever Stephen Greer is doing, with C5, that's kind of his magic. Like, he doesn't say it, he doesn't mention it. He never, because I guess it's not on brand, and maybe it might scare people away, right? But that kind of trying to contact the crafts, what I would call as a magician, the other, right? And by the other, from a magician standpoint, it can be everything. It can be fairies, it can be aliens, it can be angels and demons, and everything in between. All right. As a magician, my paradigm is that we live in a world. We basically live submerged into spirit consciousness. Spirit consciousness is everywhere. Like, we are we are ontologically tied to our physical bodies. So our consciousness is almost like aggregates of consciousness around the physical body, but there are other aggregates of consciousness that do not aggregate around the physical bodies, and they're everywhere, right? So in many ways, when I first discovered, first of all, that there existed a UAP, a UFO community, I never knew that up until recent years. Through the lockdowns and everything, I was like, oh, like, I have so much time on my hand. Let's discover what's there. Right? It's like,
that's how we both got into it too.
Yeah, like that. There's so much stuff in there. I grew up reading about UFOs, but then life has a way of getting you to other places, right? And so then when I discovered Stephen Greer, which I know it's a contentious character, I'm not saying I'm a fan, right? But I'm saying, like, whatever he does, it's magic, like, literally.
Yeah.
It's exactly
right. It's that transpersonal meditation experience.
Precisely.
Yep.
That. Magic can be many things, right? But magic with the K, with this specific blend of practices that Crowley trademark and that I write about in the book, really is about learning how to fine-tune these channels and contact the other. By finding your true will, by discovering your true will, you almost like put together the perfect radio, and then you can use this radio to drop into different consciousness. I would say, this might sound wild, but drop into different time streams, into the past, into the future, wherever you want. which once again, whenever I started, getting interested in the UFO and UAP community, and I started reading all these various theories about, is it nuts and bolts? Is it consciousness? Is it from the future? My answer has been, it's all of that. Like, as a magician, we always considered all of this. It's all of it. All of it.
Right.
There's no if from my standpoint, it's not these or that. All these things exist at the same time because the universe is really complex, and it doesn't do simple, which I think it's what makes it so interesting to me. I don't know if I answered the question, and I'm sorry. I must say I do ramble a lot. I do go places.
No, this is beautiful, Marco. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, which is we ask you questions and then you talk. So you're doing wonderfully. And yeah, that's an incredible answer. So I'm just for a little bit of background, I'm fairly new to the UFO subject in any formal sense, but am very experienced and interested in spiritual emergence and emergent phenomenology. So people that experience mystical awakenings, transcendent experiences, this sort of constellation of exotic and expanded consciousness that accompanies these practices, whether deliberately induced through meditation or psychedelics or breath work, or spontaneously induced, right? Sometimes these things just happen to people. And it was so clear to me when I was paying attention to the conversations in the UFO universe that a lot of the people are talking about spiritual practices. They're talking about spiritual emergence or Kundalini awakenings or whatever term you want to use that's existed in all these other disciplines. And it became so clear to me as well that the overlap between what I was practicing spiritually in terms of meditation and the Vajrayana Buddhism tradition also touched a whole lot of what Aleister Crowley was talking about, a whole lot of what the Theosophists were talking about. So it's really cool for me to hear and see this all knit together.
I would say Tema really is like, it stands directly from, I would say, maybe Mahayana Buddhism and a little bit of Vajrayana as well, and definitely Theosophy. Theosophy kind of is like the grandfather of a lot of whatever happened with the first magical revival in the late 1800s, and then Edwardian times, early 1900s. So I mean, I agree with you. A lot of people have these experiences without having to read my book or read any book on magic, right? I would say that maybe the practices that Crowley put together first, but not just him, of course. Like Crowley was one of many in a lineage of magical experimentators. They put together a series of practices that kind of have like a step-by-step process, which I do outline in the book. And I think I'm one of the few that actually go and try to really say, okay, well, this practice have a step, like you should go from A to B to C to D to have results. Those really are a way. It's a way for people to let's try to make sense of maybe this one experience that I had that kind of changed my life. Like you were mentioning, like Kundalini awakening, it's something that it does happen to people, or having moments on the dance floor. Maybe if you took some drugs, like maybe something happens there, and say, "Hey, it wasn't just the drugs. Something else, something bigger than me was there with me. Can I go back there without drugs? Can I go back there without every other aid?" I think that's what magic does, really. So yeah.
Well, Marco, on the show, we talk a lot about observation versus interpretation and how important that is in the field of like studying UFO stuff, because often we can have the most conservative hardline skeptics agree with the nature of the observation, and it comes down entirely to the interpretation. But yeah, I'm philosophically, a skeptic, materialist, atheist, all that kind of stuff. But we are so focused in this show on good faith debate, and I think that there needs to be room for all of these conversations. And I think that there's room for benefits from the practice of ritual and magic and stuff like that. Now, I just love to hear if magic is being directed towards a purpose, if the aim of it is to accomplish certain effects. Does it matter? Like, is there a physical thing that you're describing that is producing those effects independent of human action? Or is it is there a relevance there to it being just directed intrinsically, or actually manifesting something from outside of you?
Well, that's first of all, that's a very good question, and I don't think I have a perfect answer to that. I can tell you my direct experience, and this is, I guess, this will be always the answer that every Telemite will give to you, back to you, because one of the main points in Telema is it's the individuality of our experiences, right? Like we start from this point that like we can only experience what we experience, right? That's it. Like I really don't know what you will see, what you will feel. We might see similar things, but it's not just a matter of interpretation. Like something that I see might be something that you recognize, but in fact we're seeing different, completely different things. So from my stand, from starting from that point, it's really all about trying to stick to the plan of the magical practice, right? And see if you get to a point where you come into a series of information that it was not there before. Like, can you generate from zero? Like, can you generate from information that was not there before? That's what I mean when I don't know if I'm explaining very well, but the point is that I'm trying to make is that when I mentioned before, discovering the true will or pure will, it really means that once you have unlocked that direct connection with the divine, are you getting new things? Are you getting to discover things you didn't know before? And those things, like can you use them? Can they make a difference in your day-to-day life? So is this about like, can I then share this experience with you or with anyone else? I don't think I can, right? It really I don't know if it ends up becoming almost like a solipsistic experience, but maybe it is, right? Maybe it is something that can only be experienced by myself, or by yourself, or by anybody else who's tried these things, and that kind of would be good enough, I guess, for me. Like I'm not concerned at all as a magician with the idea. First of all, if my views are confirmed by anybody else, nor trying to convince you of my views, right? It's all from a magician's standpoint, and we're talking about something that's a little bit more advanced than what I described in the book, because you really should have done all the preparatory work that gets you to the point where you have this direct connection with the divine. Or with the other, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be, because divine can be a bit of a loaded term, or God can be a bit of a loaded term. Let's go with the other. That's absolutely fine. The point is that I'm making is that, like, once you have that, you should become kind of unconcerned with trying to justify yourself. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I felt like I was going this way.
See, and you're kind of getting exposure to both sides of this show, because I'm listening to everything Marco's saying and going, oh yeah, yep, this all tracks. This is completely what my experience has been. Like you're very much speaking my language around these kinds of experiences and practices. But I also I don't want to speak for Campbell, but I'm sure Campbell's having some opinions or thoughts on this as well.
Well, I think that's perfect. You are zeroing in on sort of what I was getting at. If it matters fundamentally what the interpretation is, if it's not harming anyone, benefiting you,
right.
It's like just doing affirmations daily. You can quantify the effects of that. You can measure that it actually produces an outcome, even if you know that there's a placebo effect. I'm not saying that is necessarily what's going on, obviously, but I can see other things that would demonstrate that could be sort of happening. So I think,
I'll tell you, like even if it was a placebo effect, I wouldn't be concerned with it, right? In the sense that, like in every magical operation, you always have to set up a goal. Like, what is it you want to achieve, right? I'm thinking, let's say that you want to conjure an angel or a demon, and evocation magic is quite advanced, right? It's not something that you do at first. First, you have to almost like first you have to go to the gym and maybe some fat or put on some muscle, condition yourself, and then Once you've done that, and it takes maybe a year or two if you stick to it, then you can start trying to contact other intelligences, other aggregates of consciousness, as we were saying before, right? And that kind of is, in my experience, kind of is one of the main ways you can actually get information, receive that kind of gnosis that you didn't have before while you contact these other aggregates of consciousness. But my point is that I'm really not concerned if these things exist or not, right? In the sense, like, in the moment that something speaks back to me, in the moment that, at the beginning of the conjuration, I'm alone in the room. At the end of the conjuration, there's something else in the room, because maybe something else speaks back to me. Maybe it's not words, right? It's thoughts that happens in my mind. It's feelings, or maybe there's a significant change in the which that could be actually quantified by various tools, like, for instance, dropping of temperature, right? Things like that, right? I'm at the end of the day, I'm unconcerned with the idea: is this real, or is this just that in my head? Like, my point is that, am I getting information, and is this information something that I didn't know before? And by that I mean, what happened to me over the years when I experimented with the evocation really was about never ever knowing about this or that author, and maybe this conscience tell me, like, you should read this or you should read that. And of course, I know the skeptic point of view could be, well, actually, you actually knew about that, but it was buried into your subconscious. It could be. I will never say I am 100% sure that what I'm contacting is a demon or an angel. But what I care about is that, am I getting something out of it? And I think that that's, this probably really mentions this in Liber ABA as well. It says something at the beginning. I'm not quoting verbatim, but it says, like, in this book, we speak of Sephiroth, of planes, of gods, angels, and demons. It is immaterial if these things exist or not. What matters is that if you do certain things, certain results follow. And they also say something like the reader should is earnestly advised not to put any philosophical validity into any of this. So like, it's very maybe utilitaristic, right? Like, can I get something out of it? And again, actually you mentioned it in passing. Is it? I think it's important to say, is it something that does not harm anybody else? Because of course, that's for me, that's a given. But I think it's important to say it out loud, right? Because of course, if the voices in your head tells you go kill somebody, well, you need help, right? And fast, right? But in my experience, that never happens, though, because in my experience, like, the other once it's contacted, is actually very positive about the human experience. So once again, for me, it's very strange to hear all this concern about, are the UFOs evil, or are the UFOs demons, or they want to kill it? There's my friend Peter Levenda. Everybody knows him. I guess we had a lot of discussion on that. He wrote the foreword for my book, and we had a lot of discussion on this, in the sense that he does think that, well, maybe there could be something a bit nasty out there. And I say, well, that's never been my experience, actually. The experience for me has always been, there's, outside the human experience, the stark difference of good and evil kind of dissipates, because in my experience, once we are incarnated into this flesh, we see duality. We see the good and the bad. We see the cold and the hot. All the everything you think as a polarity. That's our experience into this world. Once you live behind the world of flesh, and you can do it in many ways. You can do it while you sleep, all the time, and every time you dream, your consciousness goes somewhere else. You can do it through magical operations, or possibly you do it when you die, right? And my experience, when you leave the world of flesh, there's no good and evil. It's just like consciousness and expanding consciousness. I guess the Buddhists speak about the sunyata, the void. That's experience, right?
Yes.
So I don't know, we got here, but hey.
Yeah, but one of the things I wanted to respond to too is my experience. I've never had that binary sense of good and evil, or angels and demons, right? That feels to me like a false dichotomy. It also, I mean, speaking as someone who is definitely not Christian, it also feels to me like a transposing of this very Christian binary onto things that largely exist outside of that, or outside of those ideas. I was curious about your thoughts or your views on how these kinds of experiences inform or shape creative processes or inspiration. Because hearing you talk, it always reminds me of, say, the artistic muses, the muses inspiring artists or musicians. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how these practices inform creative inspiration.
I am 100% convinced that, this contacting the other does bring immense influx of inspiration in the human experience. Like, humanity is historically has been inspired by the contact with the other. It can be, Moses on Mount Sinai seeing something and coming back with moral and ethical ideas that shaped our, like it or not, shaped the Western tradition, or the Western culture, really, for the last 5,000 years and counting, pretty much. Or it can be, thinking about for instance, the Lennon She in the Irish folklore tradition, which is this fairy that inspires poets, and then it's just one, right? Or the muses of the Greeks, right? Like, you would go Mount Parnassus and you get possibly inspired by the muses, but then maybe the menace would come and kill you, and because you saw too much of the divine, and you could not take too much of that, right? On that note, maybe this is something that is true, in the sense that in order for your experience of the other to be positive and so inspirative, like we were saying here, you really should try and not force it unless you get to the point when you're really ready for that. And again, this is what magic does, right? It's not just magic. Buddhist practice will get you there. Tantric practice will get you there. Sufi practice will get you there. Magic really is,
right,
what we created here in the Western tradition, especially in the last 150 years, more or less, right? But the point is that if you try and force, to see the other too fast, that could be detrimental to you. Not because that thing is evil and wants to get you, but it's because it's of a magnitude so much bigger than the humans that you can get swept away. It's almost like, if you approach if you surf and you want to go and on super high waves immediately, it's not going to end up well for you, right? Instead, the same thing. Like, I'm thinking, every sport has the same the same allegory. One of my teachers, this guy called Michael Berthiaud, which some of you might have heard because he wrote about UFOs as well a lot. In Ontological Graffiti, he says something called the good UFO versus the bad UFO experience. And he really says something that, which can be a little bit controversial, but I know it to be true because I experienced it, in the sense that he says a lot of those people that report very nasty experiences with alien abductions experiences or something similar to that, what really happened to them is that by chance they chanced upon the Leonard's own Parnassus and they weren't ready. And that scared them shitless, right? It's like, oh my god, what is that? But if the same person would go in the same experience but maybe with a year of training, then they would see something completely different, right? This still doesn't explain the cattle mutilations, though. I don't have an answer for that.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
This is great. I was speaking with P.D. Newman last week. He writes a lot on shamanism and ethnobotany. And one of the things we talked about was similar to what you're saying about how it is an incredibly violent and harmful act to break apart somebody's ontology without their explicit consent and experience, and I think when we're talking about these lineages, I mean, my experience in Vajrayana, right, it's not exactly initiatory, but it's similar. The point is that at the heart of this is this idea that these practices and these ideas can be, they're power tools, right? You don't just hand them to somebody and have them go at it. You have to give them sort of the appropriate ontological, psychological, psycho-spiritual, etc. frameworks to experience them, because they can be extremely intense, up to and including like complete ego dissolution. And I mean, if you
Absolutely.
read, right, like you read reports from people who have psychedelic experiences that wind up far more intense than expected, and somebody experiences ego death or ego dissolution. If they aren't prepared for that and they don't really know what to expect or anticipate, these are extremely harmful experiences. They're super traumatic. They're very, very upsetting. They require substantial amounts of integration and post-experience processing. And I think similarly, when we talk about spiritual emergence in the very broadest sense, to include magic, altered states of consciousness, UFO encounters, etc., without appropriate priming and frameworks to interpret and contextualize what's happening, like these are deeply upsetting experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And in fact, what my personal belief, right, is that a lot of the narrative, the negative narratives that come alongside, UFO experiences or experience with the other, really, that's where I believe in the in the CIA or psyops. We know that these people were trying to were feeding people with too much LSD, where they're giving them too much chemicals and whatnot.
MK
Possibly
Ultra,
because
it's a real thing. Yeah.
I mean, we know, like, by now we know this stage happened, right? It's not like we're not wondering about it anymore, and that's exactly it, right? Possibly we are now in 2023 with a lot of people that think that aliens are out there or the other is out there to abduct them, because unfortunately, yes, a lot of people have been burned, but by humans, right? In the sense that a lot of people in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, possibly, after some very key events that forced the governments to say, hey, these things exist. We're going to have to do something about it now. And what we do, we're going to experiment on our population. So that's, again, this is my personal belief. No proof whatsoever, right? But again, going back to Peter Event, like, that's what he writes in his book, in Sinister Forces. It's pretty much like that, right? So yeah, I think that if it's definitely possible to have horrible experiences with that. Again, it's very possible to have horrible experiences by going to a shamanistic retreat done by bad people. You end up in a sweat lodge and you die because you don't know that in order to go through a sweat lodge, you have to be fit. You have to go to do certain steps to prepare yourself. Or maybe you go to a ayahuasca ceremony and you see monsters, because the shaman there is not a real shaman, so he doesn't know what to do, and he just wants the money because he became so commodified and so popular, right? I think it's the same thing with magic, and what magic really should do is to give everybody the tools to explore these vast vistas of the possible and the impossible as well, but knowing that, as I like to say, it's a marathon. You're training for a marathon. You're training for the long run. You're not training for a sprint. If you want to, start doing magic and the next day you want to conjure Belial, good luck with that. First of all, because nothing will happen. That's the thing. It's like, and possibly you will say, oh well, this is all crap. That's all bullshit. Doesn't work. Or like we did during the pandemic on my community online. When we started, it was like, by the way, the book comes from a whole series of lessons that I wrote and that I shared with my community online. We started with, I don't know, 20 people almost 3 years ago to date, because we here in the UK, the lockdown started on the 28th of March, and on the 21st of March I started. It was at the time Patreon. Now it's something else. And at the first we were like 12, 15 people, and then over the course of 6 months, it grew up to 150. I mean, I must say that it really helped that I got sucked into Hellier. I don't know if you guys watched Hellier, which was this, to me, it's like the best, high strangeness UFO thing on TV ever. Well, it's not TV, it's on Amazon Prime and YouTube. And I became friend with the people that run it and put it together. And so I got a little bit of exposure because they invited me to one of their online conferences. And that the thing is that from September on, things really exploded. And so I started writing more and more. But I was telling the people in my community, we will get to the point where we're going to see something that will maybe make your jaw drop. But in 1 year time, in 1 year and a half time, if you think I'm telling you this because I want your Patreon money, free to go, doesn't matter. Or we can actually stick to it and get to the end of it. And many people did. And you see people right now that never thought that they could actually conjure angels, and now they've done it. And the point is that angels are really not what you expect them to be. Anyway, I'm rambling as usual. So there you go.
Observationally, I think it's really interesting that people describe very similar experiences, very important, profound experiences. We have people like Nikola Tesla describing something like what we would in modern terms say like information download. We have the paintings of religious individuals, like literally a scroll being fed into their mouth because they're describing it as an instantaneous, new information emerging. So I think there's a lot of really good evidence that people are having these experiences and that they're extremely profound and even have very significantly shaped human history repeatedly. Now, in that, there's a lot of power, and we've touched on that a little bit. The way that people can process those things, it can become a core element of their identity. It can draw people in. We see good and we see bad coming out of that kind of thing. So maybe we could touch a little bit on like the dangers involved. How do you frame the dangers? Like when something can be so powerful, an experience like this, it can shape somebody's entire life. How do you navigate that carefully within that space?
This is a very good question. And first and foremost, my suggestion is always that if you decide to become a magician, you also have to do something incredibly mundane at the same time, right? So that you always balance yourself out, right? You cannot just be, especially at the beginning, right? When you're just getting started, and by that I mean the first 10 years of your practice, because I measure this in decades, right? For me, this is my third decade. So I really think that the first 10 years, you should have a magical practice and, I don't know, football with friends, music, whatever, like go to clubs, girl, women, men, whatever you like. It's just like, it cannot be just that, because if it's just that at the beginning, as you said, you get sucked in. One serious danger that I see and that I experienced myself because I had to extricate myself in is that usually those who really get sucked into hierarchical groups that very easily become cults. It's me. That's me. That happened to me pretty much because
Right.
I became part of something called Ordo Templariensis, or OTO, which is it's a sort of like kind of like Freemasonry for magicians. Okay, it's terrible defining like that, but I guess you get the idea. And the problem there is that what I learned is that no matter the intentions, no matter the people in groups that are based around hierarchies and groups that are based about, I would say maybe super rational or illogical beliefs, can devolve into cult status. Very simple, very very simple. I keep saying, I've been saying many times, I don't suggest anybody. Doesn't matter if you know about magic or not. Doesn't matter if you like Crowley or not. Doesn't matter if you need community or not. Do not join anything. Like, we live in times where you don't need it. You don't need it anymore. Once upon a time, you had to go to the order in order to get more information. Information now is on Google. You just have to get your Google full up. And
This Marco, so you're touching on something I really wanted to ask you about And let me frame up the conversation or the question, which is that, right, with the advent of technology, with the advent of the internet, there's so many other distributed non-hierarchical places to exchange this kind of information and connect with other people. And this obviously flies in the face of what has historically been initiatory lineages and secret practices and affiliations. And I was wondering if you could talk about how the internet has basically helped democratize a lot of this practice and information.
I mean, look what we're doing right now. Like we're on YouTube, right? And we're talking about things that, when I started, it was you have to go and find the right book, and oftentimes some of this stuff was not written down, so you had to join groups with hierarchies. So you had to buy into the hierarchy in order to even get the information. That there's no secrets anymore, right? I think the 14th Dalai Lama said that this is the age without there's no secrets anymore, and it's true in the sense that everything that traditionally has been seen as being gate kept as magical secrets, it's all on the internet, right? I was mentioning the OTO and how the OTO is a very good idea that devolved into cult of personality of the leaders right now. But the thing is that if you're curious about what the OTO is about, you can Google right now OTO 9-degree secret, and you will find maybe a link to a mega archive that gives you all the documents. It is true. You might look at the documents and say, I don't know what this means, right? Because it is coded language. The same way alchemy is coded language, right? When you look at the Motus Liber, when you look even maybe at the Red Book by Carl Gustav Jung, you look at it and say, okay, well, beautiful pictures, but what does it mean? And then you realize that there is a code, and maybe you have to sit down and Google a little bit more, and by that I mean a couple of years, in order to get all the pieces of the puzzle. But if you are willing to put that kind of work in, you don't need anything. You don't need any group. On the flip side, you were mentioning lineages, right? And I'm thinking, of course, Buddhist lineages, Tantra lineages. There is something that the idea that you have to there's some sort of energy, some sort of again super rational or illogical kind of fluid that can be passed from person to person, right? Now I had this passed on to me, and I'm one of the things I've done over my life. I received a consecration as a bishop of the Gnostic Church. There are many Gnostic churches, by the way, so it's a very vast sea. But the thing is that something was done to me that day, which is really literally like imposition of the hands. I could feel something passing through me, and I'm gonna tell you a story, which it's up to you if you want to believe it or not. This was done to me by Michael Bertio in his house basically he lived. I don't know if he still lives there. I haven't seen him in many years. By the time we're talking 2006, he used to live in South Michigan Avenue, Chicago, on the 33rd floor, penthouse level, and a very strange house. And so we go to the ceremony, which is really it's almost like a small mass. There's no sex involved. I mean, you might read some strange things online, nothing like that. Like it's very philosophical in nature. In fact, some invocations, some words, pass, oaths, and whatever. And then an imposition of the hand. I could feel something passing to me. Then we say our goodbyes. I leave. I go to call the elevator. And there's a jolt of energy that discharges from my arm, and the elevator dings. Like I didn't touch it. It was like I was almost like bursting with something that manifested as static energy. I don't know, like I don't know what it is. I'm not a scientist in the slightest. Like my master's is religious anthropology, and I've been a musician all my life. So like that's. But I could see it, I could feel it. It's one of those things that I mentioned before. Those memories that are like imprinted in your head. So there is that flip side, right? That kind of initiation that the term in Sanskrit is parampara. There's this transmission of this material energy, whatever that is, it does add something to the mix. But if you're looking for secrets to just know intellectually what is all about, right? You really don't need to join anything at all. If you want the other thing, if you want the power, well, once again, it's so easy in this day and age to do your due diligence and find out who's the good teacher, who's the good initiator, and who's the not so good one, right? Of course, we live in also in an age of disinformation. So again, maybe it was like this window where things were good and now things are starting to become problematic again, because you can kind of write anything about everybody right now, and then how do you know if it's true or not? But yeah.
One of the major shifts in my own practice occurred when I started to practice in collaboration and cooperation with other people, right? I was always a solitary practitioner, solitary meditator. All of my experiences were just Leah and the divine or whatever. But as I would say over the last year, as I've explored the communal or transpersonal experience associated with these practices, on the one hand, I'm so happy I had these solitary practices in place, but on the other, I think that there is something really intense and synergistic if you're with the right person or people in terms of having complementary energy or being able to kind of co-create these sort of experiences, either in a group or just with one other person. And to me, that now that I've found that level of practice is so deeply appealing. Right? Like having these transpersonal experiences is really, really fascinating to me, both intellectually and spiritually. And to me, that also speaks to the appeal of finding a group, you know, like being able to have like a pool of people to draw from to co-create and co-build these experiences.
I mean, absolutely. Like you're touching on something very important, right? In Thelema and in general in magic, like one of the highest possible practices, more complex practices one can aspire to is sex magic, right? And a lot of people have this idea, a false idea that sex magic is also like getting kinky and
right. Yeah, it's like slapping someone on the ass, tying them up, and that's it. Yeah, sparks fly.
In fact, it really is about finding the right person or person that you can go to such a deep level of intimacy, like you were describing, that you can truly co-create, and then you can actually tap onto that jolt of energy that the orgasm brings up, which is, I mean, in my experience, is the strongest experience we can feel, really. Fear doesn't cut it, gets closer, but not really. Like the moment whenever you really explode in an orgasm with a person that you love, it's that's like almost like this window where you see something else. I mean, it's the mors justi in Latin, or le petit mort in French, right? Like little death, that moment of I can see something is happening here. Perfect. So that moment where an infinite array of possibility opens. And in fact, the idea is that you have to be training yourself to then be absolutely lucid in that specific moment, which is very different. But like you were saying, it's difficult to find people to do like that, and I would say in experience almost impossible, to be fair. And if you want to like lower down a notch a little bit, maybe that's very that's the non plus ultra, like that's the highest level. Even like finding a group of people that you like, that you would get into your, invite into your house, you invite them for dinner, invite them to stay over, right? You trust them, or even, you would like to see them outside, magical space time, because again, in my experience when I was a member of the OTO, and when I experienced other lodge groups kind of types, most of the times I didn't want to see those people outside the lodge group. But, I guess these are not my people, right? And maybe this really outlined how important it is to find your family, and it's very difficult. I almost give up on it, to be fair. I haven't completely given up on it because I know these people exist. These people are the people of my community, those men and women that I've spent the last 2 years, right? But of course, they're scattered over the world, right? Literally, from there's a few here in the UK, which I'm very grateful to be able to see from time to time. Most of them are in the US, in Canada, and Australia. It's and if you really wanted to get them all in one place, it's kind of problematic, right? But then again, it's either them or I wouldn't do it with anybody else, because it's so difficult to find the right people. And again, I don't think you'll find it, but just by googling up OTO or Rosicrucian or Amok, whatever, showing up at the local group, the chances for you that you will find the right person are infinitesimal. So you mess it up for yourself for failure, and then everything's gonna be bad. Don't be me. I've done it.
You're touching on an interesting point, and this is maybe part of where magic and UFOs, in a sense, align, both on the fringes of culture and stigma attached to them historically, often unjustified stigma. We look back, and I'm interested in the Icelandic sagas, and I'm aware that that's one of the primary sources of knowledge about the traditional practice of pagan Northern European ritual magic, and the church successfully completely eradicated. There is no unbroken chain of magic practice from the ancient times today, at least in the European context. It speaks to the draw that magic has, and the fact that people come back to it centuries after it was completely eliminated, and even with that stigma that always was there. Would you be able to speak a little bit about what drew you into the subject originally, and maybe a little bit about how you constructed the specific set of practices that you are now teaching to others, given that there is this broken historic chain of practice?
So I was born and bred in Rome, and I was baptized by the Pope. I wanted to get away from it. that's what was really, what made me want to say, that's not me. I need to find something else. And when I mentioned I was baptized by the Pope, a less known thing is that if you can go to the Vatican, you can put your name down for your child to be hello, you need a key, for your child to be baptized by the Pope in batches, right? And also, my godfather was working at the Vatican at the time.
They baptize at scale, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's very efficient.
It's an interesting picture of me that my dad has. It hasn't been scanned. I should digitize it. It's a fun picture. Anyway, my family was not overly. It was not religious at all. That was something that had to be done because it's like a tradition, right? So I didn't want that. I wanted to find. I always felt there was something else. Like I was very attracted to the rituality of Catholicism, but I didn't like not so much the message. The message of Christ, I mean, it's great, right? Like, be a nice person. How can you not like that? But the point is that, like everything else, to use Philip K. Dick term, empire never ended. The idea that the oppressing empire became the church, right? It's the same thing. I didn't like that, so I went and looked for the strange. It also happened that I grew up in a very big house with a lot of books and without my parents, so I was reading around. And
that was my life experience too. Look at how we turned out.
It was exactly reading, and when you're 8 or 9 and you read very different things, from Marquis de Sade to Peter Colosimo, it's like, okay, the world is much wider than I thought. So how do I find it? In the summer of 1990, by complete chance, I was 12. I discovered Aleister Crowley in a comic book. And the rest, as I say, is history in the sense, because I immediately sourced his magnum opus, like Liber ABA, Magic in Theory and Practice, and it became my life's work already, like at 12, to try and make sense of it. because I could not understand a single word that was written in. In hindsight, I discovered that I didn't understand much of it because at the time the only edition available was an abridged edition that the translator didn't know exactly what to do with. So a lot of things were mistranslated, were missing, So in time I realized, okay, I was stupid, but not that stupid because certain things were really missing. But that's the point. Like I try to make sense of it, and eventually I ended up joining Magical Order, the AA, and I was trained into it. So the practices that I now teach are, let's say, kind of like an echo of the practices that were taught to me, because I teach them without the infrastructure of an order, without oaths, without anything like that. So in many ways, I strip them from a lot of the mystique, maybe, and I try to make them less religious and more practical, if that makes sense. And also, it also came to me that when the lockdown started, these practices could help others to make sense of this, incredible change that everybody had to experience. Right? Doesn't matter if you believe that COVID was real or not. I'm not going to debate that. It's definitely real. I had it. I almost died of it, so I can tell you it's fucking real. But the point is that I knew that for people locked into most of the times like a tiny room, to be able to sit down, learn how to control their breathing, learn how to see with their inner eye, even if maybe some people find it very difficult to visualize, right? And by the way, visualization is not something that's found in every magical practice. There are other magical practices that don't do any of that, right? They're all external. But the magic with the K, like, it really goes into, like, you have to start from your inside. Like, you have to eradicate, almost like put a point inside of you from which everything else will spring. And I was thinking, well, you know what? I learned it when I was, in my teenage years. And in my teenage years, I learned it because I had like I said, I was quite like a solitary kid. I was either playing metal alone, like learning how to play Megadeth, or I was reading magic. I wouldn't really start going out till I was 18 or 19, something like that. So I'm thinking, oh, look at that. This is exactly this kind of the same experience that happened when I was a kid, because I was alone in my house pretty much. Now that everybody's alone in their house, hey, how about we try if that's going to work for them as well? And it did, right?
Mhm.
Like, it really did, because, well, I'll tell you, something that I noticed is that, I mentioned this community online that I have, like, I wouldn't say it's past its prime because it sounds bad, but it's definitely like we had a zenith and now we're going back down, because of course people go out again. Thankfully, we're not locked in anymore, but also people find it more difficult to dedicate the right amount of time to the practices because they have other things to do right now. They have to see their friends, they have to see their family, and go to the movies, etc., etc., etc. So in many ways, those years, especially I was thinking 2020 to the end of 2021, maybe beginning of, well, let's say 2021, that was like almost like the perfect time to see if I could actually renovate these practices, like, get rid of a little bit of the mystique, concentrate on what matters, what you can do with it, and see if people could get benefits from it. And by that I mean, and I'm gonna go in something that might seem like an hyperbole, but somebody told me that practices that saved people's life, because they imagine what, I don't know what your lockdowns were like, but some of my friends were stuck in a room for almost 2 years now. So in for them to be able to go inside themselves and discover a universe that exists inside each of us was life-changing. Yes, there's still a stigma attached to magic, but at the end of the day, who cares, right? There's stigma attached to everything. Like, we live in times where everybody has something to say about others. Most of the times, these are usually people who come from incredibly ultra-reactionary, neocon kind of backgrounds,
Yes.
and we don't like them. I mean, by we, I mean me, but that's
Yes, not a big fan myself either.
Oh yeah, you're among allies here. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Oh, maybe we could just touch briefly on something that comes out of that conspiracy culture and how like magic traditionally was seen as a conspiracy culture in a sense, right? Like the idea of witches conspiring to cause harm to the village and things like that. And oftentimes you see that there are institutional reasons those things are happening. It's not about the individuals and stuff like that. And we have in the modern day, obviously, serious issues with conspiracy culture emerging and influencing the course of developments, like on an international scale in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
How could we separate out those things? Like, could you talk a little bit about like the modern practice of magic? You have described it being about influence and causing things to occur. Is it more like you're trying to cause things just for yourself? Would there be a practice where you're trying to influence others? How does this sort of play out ultimately?
Well, magic can influence others. It's absolutely true. Magic can be seen as a weapon, and as usual, like in weapon can be used for good if for you to defend yourself, or can be used for harm. To if you go and shoot a random person, that's terrible, right? I will not say no. Magic is only good. We only do magic for good. Absolutely not. In fact, I have no doubts that there are bad actors out there, which could be governments or singular people, whatever, like bad actors in general, that will use magic for nefarious causes. If you look at whatever has been happening in recent years in Russia, Russia is a very complicated topic. I don't think we can really cover it right now, but it's definitely true that there is a lot of magical thinking that goes into
Yes.
Russian imperialism, right? I'm thinking of
Mhm.
Alexander Dugin, and
Yep.
I'm thinking of Russian cosmicism.
Yes.
Alexander Dugin is a magician. It's
Mhm.
a full magician, and
Yep.
he is quite skilled. And I personally believe it's quite dangerous. So, if we look at it from a conspiracy theory standpoint, is that there is people out there getting to get us. Yes, there's always been. There always will be. It's the
Mhm.
human nature to just be like this, right? What I notice is that in recent years, and most especially in the last year, in fact, there's been almost like an acceleration of what I called, satanic panic 2.0. I started seeing this happen already in the 2015, 2016, so something like 6, 7 years ago now. Time flies. But there's been literally like an exponential curve in the last year of ultra reactionary, usually, ultra Christian groups or, investigators that have been once again putting the blame of everything that happens on magic and magic practitioners. I get I'm particularly stigmatized because I'm Thelemite, so Crowley is always like the source of all evil. If anybody wants to have a laugh, you can go and scroll on my Twitter feed a few days ago. I'm not gonna name names, but there's been a little bit of an interaction with one of these characters, and the reality is that you cannot reason with them.
Right.
You
Oh, right.
you got-
Yeah, that's the biggest mistake of liberalism, is thinking it can reason with fascist
I
thought.
agree. I agree
Yes.
with you
Yeah,
100%.
you're among friends here, Marco. I promise you that.
That's why I don't call myself a liberal,
Mhm.
because
Yeah, I don't call myself a liberal.
I will not reason with them. I will do
Right.
something else. Also, it's not
Yes.
YouTube friendly, so we're not
That's
going to
the
say it.
spirit. Yes.
That's the thing. And like you could not reason with these people because their idea is that they have the truth, and they
Mhm.
call their truth, Jesus Christ, which is whatever, right? And everything else as it's fake. You're lying to them. It's not true. You're evil,
Mhm.
and they're not gonna say it. But if you possibly could get burned at the stake, that'd be great as well, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's the big problem, in the sense that our society became incredibly polarized in recent years, and there's no turning back from that. Like you
Right.
cannot
That's only going to
wish.
continue fracturing. It's not going
Yeah, you
away.
cannot wish the bad away, right? Oh no, we
Mhm.
should like please don't torture me. Well, they're not going to torture you today, but eventually they will come for you as well, right?
Yes.
So yeah,
This is a dynamic I've reflected on a lot. I've been a participant in a number of leftist spaces and communities, and there seems to be this missing link on the certainly in the American left around spirituality and mysticism, and it has very much become the purview of the alt-right or of authoritarian or totalitarian style thinking. And I'm very curious, as someone who is aware of the encroachment of the alt-right onto these ideas, how do you navigate it? What are your thoughts on participating in these practices and using these practices, while also, I would say, trying to do the good work of, if not addressing, at least avoiding the kind of fascist tendencies that can show up?
so first of all, I would like to say that I mentioned earlier on before that I was a member of OTO and then I left. I left because of hierarchical problems. It always becomes nepotism, but also
Right.
because I found out that that encroachment of the alt-right was more like a cancer in metastasis in the OTO,
Yes.
right? People at the top were fully endorsing, and I'm not even talking about Trump fans or Trump voters back during the 2016 election and the years that followed. And I'm talking about people that using that as a jumpstart to go into white supremacy and going
Right.
into all the horrible things that we all very aware of.
Mhm.
How do you deal with it? I don't think I have the perfect answer, right? Because as I said before, you cannot reason with them. But the problem is that what you can do is that, well, first of all, I'm always trying to be everywhere to keep telling people the magic is something different. Magic is not the devil's work, even if we like the devil, like because we like everything that's outside the other. But magic is not also the exclusive religion or philosophy, metaphysical philosophy of the right. A lot of, I mean, we've been here before, right? In Italy, we had Giulio Evola, which was a fascist, and he
Yep.
was trying to do exactly the same thing back in the day when fascist 1.0 happened, right? And we always had the ultra reactionaries, the perennialists, the traditionalists. We always had that, right? And the way I go about it is really that I give no quarter to them, in the sense that I will always call everybody out. And by that I mean every time I see even the slightest whiff of sulfur, if you want to call it like that. I would say, I was going to say something else, but let's keep it like sulfur.
Sure.
I would just call it out. Of course, this creates a lot of problems in the sense that, first of all, in the sense, not problems like physical problems. I'm not overly concerned about that, maybe because I'm big and I can defend myself, but also because I don't live in in country where people have access to firearms. That's very,
Yes,
I
where
would be more
everybody is
concerned.
strapped. Yeah.
Yeah, I would be more concerned in the United States, absolutely. But also because I've always been a public person. Like when I was a musician. You every time you walk on stage, you know that something can happen, right? So you have to be present. You have to say. You always have to keep your narrative going, in a sense. And narrative, maybe it's a wrong word because it implies. Well, let's keep it like that, right? So you just have to be quarters. And the thing is that people will fight back.
Right. People will argue with you about it, right?
Yeah,
But they will
exactly.
see their views as, why don't you tolerate me? You're so intolerant. I've lived this life.
I had a major fallout with a rather big. I'm not gonna name it just because a rather big author in the esoteric world. This is the guy that spent the last 10 years, started from chaos magic, and started the last 10 years speaking about building a better world, permaculture, going to live in in Tasmania, like building a farm, all these things. And lo and
Right.
behold, he became pretty much an eco-fascist. And
Right.
it's like he will never ever relent from his position. He's been spending the last 6 months pretty much like explaining to his rather vast following that basically we are living the fall of Numenor in the Tolkien saga, which is exactly what the fascists used to say, by the way. In Italy, fascism has a love story with Tolkien. I mean, I love Tolkien. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But in Italy, if you were born in Rome, you as a god kid, eventually, when I started going out, became a god kid. I always had to fight with the fascists in Rome. They were coming from this group, this occupied space called Casa Pound, and Casa Pound in Rome.
Ezra Pound House. Yep, I know all about this.
And Casa Pound basically it's all about the glorification of Tolkien, because this idea of the white race, of the purity of the races, of the union with the gods that walk among men. And lo and behold, this author right now that lives in Tasmania is a permaculture aficionado. So good things, right? Now suddenly it's all about Tolkien, and it's all about the evil, which is pretty much everybody who doesn't agree with him, is coming at the door. And the thing is that you have to keep calling out. It will make you feel like maybe like a pariah, but that's what it is. Like you cannot let this thing rest, and there's a lot of this in my community, in the esoteric community. It's such a niche community, like you were saying, Campbell. There's so much stigma about it, so not many people want to be open about it. But then there's something else that happens, and what happens is that since it's niche, but it kind of went through a revival in recent years. A lot of people start to make money out of it. I mean, I'm the person selling courses, right? And it does well. Like people are interested in that, but then there's a lot of people that publish this book, and maybe people that sell book. And so when the business side comes in, everybody wants to keep selling to everybody, and I have a lot of problems with that. Right? When you come to my website, it's written in clear terms. Like if you don't believe COVID exists, don't sign up to my courses. If you don't if you like Trump, don't sign to my courses. If you like fascism, don't sign to my courses. Right? And I did lose revenue. I can tell you about that. People did. I really wanted to sign up to your course for 6 months and giving you, I don't know, £500, but I'm not going to do it because I felt offended. I was like, oh, you did the right thing. It was not the best for you.
This was not a good fit for you.
It is.
Awesome.
But unfortunately, I've seen maybe especially here in the UK, where everybody values external appearances more than being frank. It's Britishness after all. I've seen a lot of people, trying to make excuses for this or that person because they sell a lot of books. This person that I mentioned is, by all means, one of the biggest seller. Like one of his books sold 15,000 copies, which is insane. Like you don't sell.
Marco, we run into this in the ufology community all the time, which is that people's preoccupation with the subject supersedes and overrides any other particular value they may have. Right, we see it's become a subject du jour with a huge number of alt-right and ultra-right politicians and individuals, and people that really care about UFOs don't care because at least someone's talking about UFOs.
I mean, for me, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah,
like I think that I've seen this in passing. Like people were saying, oh, Tucker Carlson is speaking about UFOs. It's so good. It's like, are you mad? Like, why would you want or
Giorgiani? Giorgiani is a good example, right? Yeah.
The other day I've seen a picture of Russell Brand, which some of you may know, with Trump Jr. I was like, okay, this is basically the conspirituality to fascism pipeline in one photo,
like in a picture right here.
And I think like if you don't have problems with that, you need to reevaluate your life, really, right?
Yes, neutrality in these circumstances is complicity.
Absolutely. Like silence always benefits the oppressor, not the oppressed. Always, that's how it is. And I have a problem with that. That also means that likely my courses are not going to sell much more than I do, or my book won't sell much more because, oh, Marco, you're so opinionated. Yes,
you're so political.
Everything is political, and also, like if this were like the 2000s, where it was before the 2008 crash. Everybody had a lot of money. Everybody everybody was fine. I mean, at least that was my experience. So possibly I was very pampered at the time. Maybe I would have seen things differently. But now I literally spent the last decade, because in the esoteric magic community, you start seeing, by the way, fascism creeping in already in the 2010s, sorry, like that, where you start seeing like people becoming a little bit more open to talk about how, I really love going to Wewelsburg in Germany, which was the SS castle, to do my rituals there. And I was like, I was thinking like, that's wrong. Right? Why would you do that?
Right. Why would you want to go there?
Then, exactly. But then it's starting creeping in and accelerate. So right now, especially given the fact that we've been living in 15 years of decline, recession after recession, living in interesting times. So the social political strata is ripe for terrible things to happen. So you should avoid like feeding into these ideas as much as possible. It doesn't matter if you don't sell the course, doesn't matter if you don't sell books, doesn't matter if your fucking business fails, to be fair. Like you should be more on the lookout for avoiding that the people that will want you to see burned at the stake go back in power. It doesn't seem that a lot of people get it. Maybe they need to be burned at the stake. I don't know.
Yes.
So maybe they'll get there, right? I don't know. It's really is dumbfounding for me. Like I don't get it. But hey, here we are.
Here we are. Marco, this has been an incredible conversation. Super, super excited to have you join us. Before I let you get back to your evening, where can our audience find you?
So you can find me everywhere on social media. Just look for Marco Visconti. I will be. Twitter is my main social media, mostly because I'm there to try and combat the Elon Musk takeover. I'm not very successful, but hey, I like Twitter. I refuse to go away with it. I mean, if it becomes completely impossible to deal with it, I'll leave it. So Twitter is the main place where you can find me, or marcovisconti.org is the website where there's my email if you want to contact me privately by email. And then, thank you, have the best with. And then if you're curious about my courses, well, you're two choices really. If you buy the book, at the end of the book, there's a link where you can join onto my platform for free and see what it's like. Give it a try. Or you can go on to magic.marcovisconti.org, and you'll see there are various chances for you to give them buy classes, buy courses, or just come and hang. Really,
Awesome.
Because I think we are 150 people right now, quite active. Like I say, it's not. We're down from the numbers, the 300 people that we had during the pandemic, but of course, people are out there in the world, and that's a good thing, right? Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Of course.
Thank you.
Marco, thank you so much. Have a nice evening. Be well, friend.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye. Kimball, welcome to my world, dude. This is how I feel talking about UFOs. Now you get to know what it's like to talk about magic.
Hey, I like it. Magic. It's very interrelated. And I'm happy to be sort of branching out. I'm contemplating starting a new Twitter handle so that I'm not pigeonholed into just the UFO stuff. I'm liking the slight pivot we're doing.
Yeah, I really am enjoying the last couple conversations we've had, broadening who we're talking to. Right, so we are gonna wrap things up here. Coming up next week on the 8th, we'll be doing an open lines episode. So chance to roundtable with Kimball, Nick, Lewis, and myself. And then we'll be welcoming Vanessa Villoco, who runs Panparacon, High Strangeness, Fortiana, etc. So hopefully we'll see folks next week at a regular time, 9 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday evening. And we will have all four of us here to do open lines and a roundtable. Campbell, before we sign off, anything you want to say?
People should come join our Discord and chat. It's we've got a bunch of good channels and can come argue with me if you disagree with what I say, and I'll be polite and listen.
We have a very civilized Discord.
No, it's very good. Yeah, and that's the
Yeah.
thing, is it's hard to have conversations where you're sort of trying to engage on the underlying stuff, but stay respectful. And we're trying to do that, and we're, I think, doing a pretty good job so far.
Yeah, good vibes all around.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Campbell, thank you so much for taking the afternoon.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for everyone tuning in, either catching us live or on the recording. We'll see you all next Wednesday at 9 p.m. See ya.
Cheers.